Hi everyone, welcome back. We're happy to be here again for our fifth engaging live episode. To reintroduce ourselves, we are Amy and David, the founders of the Holistic Academy 2025. And today we're going to discuss a really interesting topic: how we can navigate our shadows using our intuition to find our light. So we'll cover today some of that terminology. How would we define shadows and intuition? And we're going to journey as well across history, from ancient temples to modern labs, exploring how intuition and the shadow has shaped human thought.
Yeah, beautiful topic as well. I agree that today we need to talk about this intuition, and we'll ask, what does it mean that so much of our behavior is guided by the unseen, our shadows, and intuition? How did these past cultures understand intuition, and how does modern science now deepen the picture? So those questions are going to be answered today.
It's a really exciting episode, and I've loved researching about these topics this week. But let's definitely go on this journey together, following our shadow, so that we can understand more parts of our consciousness and how sometimes when we're in that state of mind, how we can overcome it with our intuition. So, David, let's set the scene with some definitions. What is the definition of our shadows?
Yeah, well, both Freud and Carl Jung explored the shadow concept, but in different ways. And Freud's view is that he didn't use the term shadow the way Jung did, but he described something very similar in his theory of unconscious. For Freud, the shadow would align with the repressed parts of the psyche, the desires, the impulses, or memories that the conscious mind pushes down because they are unacceptable, because they are shameful, or they are socially forbidden. These repressed elements don't disappear, and they influence our behavior indirectly, often surfacing through dreams, slips of the tongue. So that's when you just slip the words and you don't want, or neurotic symptoms. So all of those ways are in the ones that we can witness the shadow. In short, Freud saw the shadow as the dark, hidden drives of the unconscious that are in tension with the ego and the social norms. And what about Jung's view? Well, Carl Jung took Freud's foundation and expanded into his concept of the shadow archetype. For Jung, the shadow is the disowned or rejected aspects of ourselves. So it is similar to what Freud said, that we are repressing and we are um, leaving that part of us dormant, let's say, until something awakens it. So they are qualities we deny, they are things that we suppress or project onto others. This can include aggression, envy, selfishness, but also positive traits that we haven't developed. So it's not just the bad things, it's also the positive ones that can lure into our consciousness. Unlike Freud, Jung emphasized that the shadow is not only destructive but also a source of vitality, creativity, and authenticity if they are integrated into who we are. So Carl Jung believed that to achieve individuation and to be authentic, the process of becoming whole, a person must confront and integrate their shadow rather than repress it. So those are the definitions. And in my opinion, shadows in life are the times we feel lost, uncertain in our careers, broken in relationships. We become ill many times, or simply the quiet ache of not knowing who we are is that kind of intuition that is trying to emerge the shadow aspect of ourselves. And shadows can be scary, of course, because they obscure clarity and they take us from this comfort space that we develop, and we can't see the full picture at the beginning. So they are also coming with doubt and uncertainty. But shadows aren't our enemies. In fact, they are our teachers. They strip away the distractions of these bright lights so we can sharpen our other senses. And for example, you can imagine walking through a dark room and you instinctively slow down, you listen more carefully, and you pay attention to your surroundings, trying to see something, trying to perceive sometimes, or trying to listen more. That's what life of the shadows do. They heighten our awareness and they make our other senses more acute. And one of them that is very, very important is the sense of interoception, that we're going to speak more about this body connection. But this is the intuition of our body telling us to do certain things and to stop doing things that are stressing us.
Wow, that was a good definition. Thanks, David, for touching upon those different aspects of our shadows. I can definitely relate. There's been times in my life of real despair and worry, and in that time, I become more hyper vigilant, more alert, more paranoid, in fact, about what's going on. But I think at times like that, there's always some inner truths or inner messages waiting to be revealed. There are reasons why we go through these cycles in life or have different challenges and incidents happen to us. But it's really important we find that little space where we can analyze them, examine them, reflect on them, and learn from them. And sometimes when you reach out and say, "What is the answer? I don't want to feel like this anymore," I sometimes find the answer comes straight back to me in a little quiet inner voice. So I'm wondering if that inner voice that has gotten me through the times of darkness, whether that is our intuition or not. How would you define our intuition, David?
Actually, I love that reflection that you share, Amy, because when you ask just the question, but you don't demand an answer, and you just remain at peace and quiet, the answer comes. The answer comes in the signals that the universe is trying to send you. So the very idea of how we can define intuition is still an enigma, because there are many different ways of looking at it, and there are many different parts of our body that we can use to relate to this concept. So, for example, the example that we gave already. Imagine that you are walking into a room and instantly you feel like something is off, and we have experienced these kind of things when we enter into a new job, for example, when we get into a meeting and the environment is very dense and heavy. So you feel those kind of things, even though you can explain why are you feeling like that. That gut feeling, those butterflies that you feel sometimes in your stomach, is what we often call the intuition. And Freud and Jung both had things to say about it, but their views were very different. Freud first thought that intuition wasn't some magical sixth sense. To him, it was your unconscious mind bubbling up all memories, hidden desires, or unresolved conflicts, influencing you without you realizing it. So, if you had a gut feeling, Freud might say that's your past tugging on you. It's not necessarily your wisdom. It's not. It's your repressed stuff sneaking out. And in other words, he didn't trust intuition very much. And here is something that I just listened today, that the junk DNA, our DNA has a code, has instructions, and we yet don't know many parts of the DNA what they codify for. So that those parts of the DNA that we don't know what are they expressing, those are the junk DNA. That's the name that they give it because they don't know what it is, if it works or not. And there is some perception now from science and how it's advancing very quickly that that kind of DNA, in fact, is your past. Is the past lineages that you have, and it's all the information from all your evolution through time. So maybe when we are experiencing this kind of intuition and sixth sense, because I do like the word sixth sense, I think that you are awakening those parts of your DNA and they are trying to tell you something. So, what did Carl Jung thought or said about the intuition? Well, he gave intuition a starring role. In fact, he believed it was one of the core ways our minds work, right alongside thinking, feeling, and sensing. For him, intuition was how we pick up on these patterns, how we connect the dots, or the sense possibilities that aren't obvious. And he saw it as a bridge between our conscious mind and the deeper unconscious. Even the collective unconscious, the big pool of human wisdom and the archetypes we all share. So I think Jung had a much clever idea in terms of linking these concepts to our history and to the past that we share with everyone. So instead of distrusting intuition, Jung saw it as a tool for creativity, spirituality, and personal growth. Another way to look at it is to think of a time when life felt dark, when the next step wasn't clear, when fear, doubt, or grief made everything uncertain. In those moments, we often search for answers many times outside of ourselves. We rely probably on books, on mentors, coaches, even endless scrolling for inspiration, or we receive this information. We don't even look for it, but someone recommends us a book. We listen to a song that sometimes reminds us of certain things, and the most reliable compass is already within us. So it's trying to awake, and that is your intuition. Intuition is that quiet inner voice, that gut feeling or butterflies, as you want to label them, that whisper saying, this is the way, this is the decision that you need to take. But here is the paradox. Intuition often speaks the loudest when we are standing in the shadow. So that's why when we have these kind of things happening in our lives, these kind of problems, struggles, obstacles, the first thing that we should try to do, although I know that it is extremely difficult, is try to be grateful for those aspects in our lives. So many times when we get or tap into this gratitude attitude, we allow this collective unconscious to awaken and to give us these kind of answers that we need. Modern science also agrees that our brain process is far more information unconsciously, and we spoke about that in the previous episodes. This information that is in the unconscious, we realize, and intuition is often how those hidden insights surface. Think of intuition as your inner lantern. It doesn't illuminate the whole path, but it gives you just enough light to take the next step. And that's often all that we need. Our intuition might be the highest wisdom to sprout, to germinate, and to bloom into a powerful potential we never knew lay inside of us. And those are also the aspects that surprise you when you step out of that comfort zone and you realize that you can do many things without even thinking, let's say, because what is speaking is your intuition. What is speaking is that inner wisdom, and you let it spoke by trusting that those decisions were the best. Now, the definition from the Oxford Dictionary says that intuition is the ability to know something by using your feelings rather than considering the facts. So that's what we are saying. When we wake up our instincts, when we wake up into our senses and we try to use them as they were designed for, that's when intuition can flow much easier. It refers also to an idea or a strong feeling about something being true that arises without conscious reasoning and often described as flash or this sense that you are doing the right thing or an unexplainable feeling. Moving beyond that is the sensation of knowing something is true by just feeling it and not by analyzing too much or trying to dig more in why you took that decision. So, can you think of a time when you knew or understood something immediately without evidence or logical thought processes, Amy?
Yeah, I've definitely felt my intuition at times, that spark or flash. Comes at times when perhaps I need to remind myself, the bath's been running for too long, and I've managed to be reminded before it overspills, or, oh no, think about the food. And is that inner voice saying, don't burn it, go and check on it. But also, I think for deeper times in my life, there's that voice that is there showing me if I have a career change or I'm moving home, which I'm moving out my own home in a week. It's often, because my intuition, some bigger sense inside says that it's the right feeling, it just feels right and true going forward. It feels that that's the necessary and aligned thing to do. So for me, it feels like a little bit like a little friend nudging me inside, saying like, go move from that house, or apply for that role, or talk to that person. I don't really think it's something you can fully define, but it's
Mm.
definitely a relationship to yourself and your body and your gut. And it's just a place which feels like when you're a child, knowing what's right and wrong, that innocence, that innocence, that sort of, that awareness, if it feels good, and that feels safe, that's your intuition saying something, or that doesn't feel quite right. Sometimes we override those senses and don't trust them or think that they're not important, but really they are. And for me, the best points of my life is when I've followed my intuition. I don't think it's just a magic force or wishful thinking. It's an inside signal or voice or body message that's really sharing about who we are in our authentic expression as a human, and how we integrate our values and our experiences and our body signals. Like, I think our intuition's all calibrated inside of us to that. So for me, it is really subtle, that little nudge. But the more I listen to it and the more I cultivate a relationship with it, the more I start to respond to the signals. And by changing my life and following my intuition as I've got older and listening to it and learning more about it, it's helped, allow me to have a more purposeful and aligned life. So I think now would be a little good moment to see if we can all listen to our intuition and find out if it really exists, especially if none of you have thought about our intuition before. So I'd like you just to invite you for 2 minutes to quieten our minds. So if you get into a good position on your chair or seat or bed, wherever you are listening, and just get comfortable. Either just leave your eyes open with a lower gaze, or if you feel comfortable, you could close your eyes. Try and get your feet on the floor and just relax, feel comfortable.
Mm.
And then take some deep breaths into your body. Let's take 3 together, and then we're going to quieten our mind and listen for any intuitive signals. So, breathing in for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's hold our breath for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And let's release our breath. 1, 2, 3, 4. And hold it again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's do that again. In for 4, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 4, 2, 3, 4. Out for 4, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 2, 3, 4. One more breath. Just doing it on your own. And letting your body just settle into its normal rhythm of breathing. Taking just a moment of stillness inside of us to listen, to be present. Noticing any inside sensations, anything in our feet or our legs, our thighs. Anything moving around in your belly, in your lungs, in your chest. Is anything in your arms, your fingers? Any sensations in your heart or your neck, your throat, or your face? Just noticing any sensations. And breathing, feeling some relaxation. Letting all the worries of the day fall to the floor for a moment and just enjoy having time sitting in peace with your body. And as you start to feel a little bit more relaxed, see if you can notice any of these sensations inside of you get a little bit louder. Or a bit warmer. Or a bit more tingly. And just notice that sensation. There's no right or wrong here. And maybe ask it if it has a message for you. And then just wait in peace as it answers. And then if there was a message or any insight or any change, just take note of that. Maybe take a moment to sit with what it might mean for you. There's no right or wrong here. What does it mean for you? And just listen to the first answer that comes into your head. And then gently, whenever you're ready, taking the time to thank your body here today. Thank yourself for being here today and for showing up. Thank yourself for learning and breathing and integrating the wisdom together with us. And just taking the time gently to feel your feet and whatever surfaces you're touching. If it feels good to wiggle your fingers and toes and shrug your shoulders. Maybe rub your hands together, putting them gently on your eyes as you open them. And slowly coming back to the space.
Mhm.
So, as we took that time to get quiet, hopefully for some of us. It takes time and practice, but intuition doesn't shout, it whispers. So if you were quiet enough or in a quiet space, you might have heard it. But also, some people might do some journaling and meditation. So if it feels good for you, please pause this podcast and take some time just to journal about what did that intuition feel like? Was that your intuition or was it something else? Just play with the thoughts, question them, write it down on the page. Some of you might have felt a tight chest or knots in your stomach, and maybe that was giving you a message of feeling like you're a bit stressed or anxious about something. Maybe you need to rest or have a bath. Or maybe for some of you, you felt really calm and at ease. And so it was giving you a message that you're right where you need to be today. Who knows? The intuition is unique to all of us, and it is a voice that none of us will know what it said. But it's definitely something that whispers and gives you signals, whether it's with words or with sensations, and your mind starts to rationalize it. And that first thought I said, that first thought that comes to your mind is that spark of intuition. So it's important not to overanalyze and overthink that thing, but just notice it and see what was our intuition trying to say. So the more you cultivate it and the more you trust it, the more you'll be able to know, is that truly your intuition giving you that signal or not? But it's really important. We trust the process, and it's a really powerful inner sense. So how was that little practice for you, David?
It was beautiful. It was very relaxing, and as you mentioned, and just connecting with your breath starts connecting the whole body and starts leaving the stress out of your life, even if it's something that is challenging you. And I think that also when we are experiencing this kind of peace is where the answers come from. And what it came out for me is that concept of this connection that we have with everything and with everyone, and what is our real meaning here in our lives. And as I was watching before this podcast that we are doing now, I was watching something about my profile and the connection with this part of me. It's a keyword that I like a lot, and that I didn't remember that I had it in my profile, and it's freedom. And for me, connecting with that word freedom heals my body and heals me in terms of creating these kind of communities that we have now in this podcast and the other ones that we share with other people in the Elevate networks. And all of these communities really give me that energy to feel that we are changing something in this landscape that seems chaotic. But once we get into these spaces, you realize that there is another world that is not advertised, or we don't have a broadcast such popular like the news. But this is these are the spaces where we can create a new way of being free and tapping into our own powers and creating this connection with the ancient wisdom that tell us a lot of things that we already know and that they are within us, just waiting for us to wake up again, because we have been indeed this sleep for a long time, just captured by these distractions and news and things that happen. But when we close our eyes, then the world stops, and then you tap into your own power. So that's why I think the perfect time for to speak about history is now. So we will explore how this history of the shadows and the intuition, and we will end with 5 holistic tips to integrate these special powers into our lives. So let's hear the history.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm glad you got so much out of that little intuitive exercise. And yeah, it's such a amazing power. And I liked how it connected to your sense of freedom too, and having that power, taking it back when you are free for yourself to live your own life, closing your eyes from the distractions and being on purpose, as you say. So, yeah, let's do it. So, the history. Listeners, let's imagine a great hallway of human history. The shelves are stretching from ancient scrolls all the way to those modern scientific journals.
Mm.
At each stop along the way, humanity has wrestled with this concept of the shadow and intuition, or how the unseen world in our mind and outside of us guides the seen, the reality that we live. So let's walk together era by era and notice how the voices of the past still echo into the science of today.
Mhm.
So, moving backwards into ancient Greece, they definitely saw intuition as a sacred power. We're going to begin the tales of our stories in Delphi, in Greece. There was an oracle who sat above vapors. I wonder what those amazing aromas of vapors were, but that oracle used to channel intuition as a prophecy.
Mm.
The messages that this oracle received were thought to come from Apollo, which was the Greek god of light. And
Mm.
so the intuition was something really revered and something important and something that perhaps only a few people could connect with and people would go and get answers from. Then philosophers like Plato and Aristotle also were, trying to understand the balance then between reason and instinct. So that was something that they started to look at. I love this book of Plato. He's famous for the allegory of the cave. If you haven't heard about it, go watch a little YouTube video, or if you have time, read about it. But in this book, he sees people in a cave, right? And in the cave, there's shadows on the walls. And this shows that on the walls, they're trying to show you that those shadows are what life really is about. And that's the same inside of us, right? Our shadows, our unconscious is trying to show us what life is really about. But for Plato, he saw that as an illusion. And as soon as you come out the cave, you would see the real life. The real life isn't shadows or little drawings of illusions on the wall. It is, nature and the sun and environments and thriving and living and being in abundance. So I really like his interpretation. His shadows showed the incomplete, this distorted reality that we live in today, this matrix that most people accept without questioning. That is the shadow on the cave. But he says, as I agree, the true world lives beyond the cave, in the realm of forms, the perfect eternal truths. So to leave the cave is to leave on the love of wisdom, studying and questioning everything about life, but really finding those perfect eternal truths, those sparks of intuition where you just feel and know it's real and true. Plato believed as well that intuition was the mind's way of remembering or directly grasping and understanding these eternal truths. He saw it as a kind of an intellectual vision, a flash of insight that lets the soul recognize truth beyond the senses. So then when we look a bit at Aristotle, he actually saw the shadows much less mystical. He thought they were simply physical phenomenon, so like a byproduct of light and matter, just as you see your shadow on the floor when the sun's behind you. So that's how he was interpreting it. But he didn't see shadows as metaphors for an illusion, just part of that natural world that we study. But Aristotle did do some work and valued a lot intuition. However, he saw it as well in a more grounded way again. He called it nous, and he says that back then for him, intuition is the intellect's, the student's ability to grasp first principles. the self-evident truths we can't prove, but we must just accept so that we can reason about everything else in the world. So for him, it wasn't anything mystical, but a sort of rational intuition. As we said, Plato and Aristotle were starting to talk about the differences between instinct and reason. So this is where it began. And so, with that, those ideas of intuition from the ancient Greeks, we can also look at intuition in ancient India, which is another great place to study and get insights from, as it evolved from a very different culture, but they also studied the same things back in the ancient times. In Sanskrit, intuition is often linked to prajna, which is deep wisdom, or buddhi, which is higher intellect. So unlike ordinary reasoning, they see intuition as something a bit higher, or a direct knowing, some inner perception that bypasses logic and senses. So just like we said, the spark of intuition, you just feel it's true. In the Upanishads, intuition is also described as the way of the soul, and it recognizes its unity with the ultimate reality. Yes, the unity with the creator, or we are all one. So for them, intuition was less about deducting and deduction into one concept and more about a realization of this concept that we embody. And for them, as we mentioned last week in our episode about the history of consciousness, for ancient Indians and also people more into modern life today, they use practices like meditation and yoga, and that's a great practice to quieten the mind so that this inner knowing, this intuition can shine through. So just to summarize, for ancient Indians, intuition was seen as something really sacred, a pathway to the truth, and not just something like a hunch, something mystical. Also, ancient Indians would have seen shadows in another way, using concepts like Maya and Avidya, which talks about sort of the shadow world or the illusion that makes us mistake appearances for ultimate reality. They see it almost like Plato's cave, but cosmic, so sort of a shadow world of illusion that we live in. And avidya is ignorance. So we also have shadow in ourselves where we are not aware of things we do. A lot of us are, even me, I'm unself-aware of a lot of things. So they're talking about this ignorance that keeps us from seeing the truth, those blind spots. That's how they see the shadows. They didn't see them, however, as anything evil, but just obstacles and veils that distort our perception of who we really are. So in turn, they also use intuition to navigate the shadows by using the spiritual practices so that they can dissolve the shadows of illusion and ignorance so that that inner light, that truth, that self-realization can come through.
Well, that is just amazing how all of this huge amount of knowledge these ancient cultures have, and we are nowadays trying to awaken this kind of sense of our intuition. And as we practice just in the exercise, closing the eyes relates to the cave of Plato and relates to being just in that space where probably you see darkness and probably you don't even know what it's going to happen. But when you have this peaceful state, answers start to come. So it's like these things and figures and forms start appearing in the cave. So now answers will appear in our lives. So let's go now into another perspective of this ancient wisdom, and let's go for what happened in China. For intuition, in Taoism and Confucian thought, intuition wasn't seen as mystical in the same way as in India or Plato's philosophy, but it was deeply respected. The Taoists spoke of Wu Wei, which is effortless action, which flows from being in harmony with the Tao, To live this way requires a kind of intuitive knowing, not forced reasoning. So think of it like an artist or a martial artist moving with total ease, just like the movements of the animals that they also use as an inspiration in these martial arts, and guided by something deeper than the conscious thoughts, just by feeling this kind of flow of the energy. In Confucianism, intuition was tied to Ren, which is humanness and moral sense, the spontaneous ability to know what is right in relationships. So it's connecting with each other and trusting that many of the projections that we do with other people are giving us answers about our shadows and the things we have to face, fix, or accept. So, intuition in China was about harmonizing with nature, with society, and the Tao, knowing without overthinking. For the shadows, they were often understood symbolically through yin and yang. Yin is the darker side. It wasn't evil, it was necessary. The shadows, in this sense, represented the hidden, receptive, mysterious aspects of life. Instead of trying to banish the shadows, the goal was to balance them with the light of the yang. So shadows weren't illusions to escape, they were vital parts of this balance equation. This definitely took a more holistic perspective. So, what about the Middle Ages?
Well, thanks, David. That's quite interesting to also learn about all the different cultures as well as ancient China. And yeah, taking on from being more holistic, I guess when we come to the Middle Ages, it was a time of deep Christianity. So times were a little bit different in this period about how we perceived intuition. So in this time, Christian philosophy and theology saw intuition as the divine illumination. So to explain that, thinkers like Augustine and later mystics saw that the true insight was coming directly from God. So is our intuition God speaking? That's almost what they believed. For scholastics like Thomas Aquinas, reason was also important, but he believed that intuition is a higher form of knowing, the soul's direct grasp of first truths or of God's presence. So that's part. Or God potentially in this time was all entangled with this higher power of intuition. Some other medieval mystics would describe intuition as the inner light or spiritual vision beyond logic. So it for them was this divine glimpse of God's truth, and it was given to you as a divine gift. In the Middle Ages and religion as well, on the other side, shadows were seen as a sin, something like ignorance, having ignorance, or if you had a shadow, they might have called you the devil. And unfortunately, that those shadows then were these forces that pulled the soul away from the divine truth. In mystical writings, shadows symbolize the dark night of the soul. I think a lot of people sometimes refer to this and have heard about this term. And that's just when you're going through absolute chaos and uncertainty in your life. You know, you feel like you're being dragged through the dark night of the soul, and your soul needs some inner guiding light to release you from such difficult times. The dark night of the soul was a term used by St. John of the Cross, and it was also to show the difficult, shadowy periods of doubt and despair that paradoxically prepared the soul for your union in God, with God. So, yeah, the shadows in the Middle Ages were kind of like spiritual trials. They saw them as sin, and, you know, they were creating distance from the divine light. And they will also use then the shadows as a form where you could purify yourself, and also come closer to that intuitive power that might be God. And then when we jump forward a little bit more into the Enlightenment period and Romanticism, we see that we also bring a bit more rationality into it, because the Enlightenments praise science and rationality. But we know as well that the Romantic poets also were insisting about imagination and intuition being a bit less rational and logic, and saying that intuition can reveal truths that reason can't. So, coming to the Enlightenment with the 17th and 18th century in Europe, it was the age of reason. So, intuition instead wasn't always center stage. The thinkers really were emphasizing that idea of rationality, science, and evidence as being the conclusive form of knowledge and thought. However, we still have some great philosophers who would still talk about intuition and look at it as an important, though more rational role. So, taking it in a more rational perspective, the French philosopher Descartes spoke of clear and distinct ideas that a mind could grasp immediately without proof, a kind of intellectual intuition. Yeah, so he was almost in agreement, this flash of truth, this inner knowing. And Kant, he took it a bit further. He said that all our knowledge begins with intuition. But I think he means when you're born, this idea of your sense intuition, that raw data from the senses, where we sense the world around us with our eyes, ears, mouth, and nose, and everything, so that we can really, as a baby, understand what we're doing and what's good and what feels right and what feels wrong. And that's also coming from tuning into that inner sense, that intuition. Kant also argued then that he thought intuition was the foundation of all human knowledge and wasn't a mystical thing, but something that happens that's cognitive. Mm. At the end of the Enlightenment, when the Romantics came back, people like Rousseau, he pushed back, saying that intuition and feeling revealed truths that reason could not. So just as I was saying again about the Romantics, they were a really great time, great group of progressive people who were really looking at giving intuition that creative and almost scientific authority. So not taking it off the scientific study. So in this period, then intuition became less mystical and more of a tool for the rational mind, or that spark of human feeling, the awareness of knowledge. And also, let's look at the shadows as well in this period. The Enlightenment thinkers would see the shadows like in a metaphorical sense as ignorance, superstition, and tyranny, the things they said that reason and science were meant to overcome. And they started to describe themselves as bringing humanity out of the dark ages into the light of knowledge. So again, that's where we can see navigating the dark shadows using the light. This period, they saw the light, but intuition as knowledge of knowing. Voltaire and Diderot and some others also used some imagery all at the time where religious dogmas or monarchs' power and old traditions, they saw them as the shadows holding humanity back. So even to this day, the shadows in our unconscious are obviously influenced by the environment outside. So they were also talking about that relationship. What are those dark forces of evil or of despair or of tyranny that means we can't live free, we can't live in accordance to our intuitive desires and intuitive knowing. So, you know, back then they saw education and science and reason is a way that we can work with our shadows and our intuition and understand it. So again, coming now all the way back, as we were talking about at the beginning, David, to the 19th and 20th century psychology, the shadow did enter science, as we spoke about with Freud, seeing it as the unconscious that treasure chest of the repressed desires, the things you don't want anyone else to know about you, those hidden secrets of what you do at home when no one's around. But Carl Jung, as we said, expanded this view and he coined the word shadows, so that's where it comes from. He called it sort of a collective unconscious, so this outer world of us that we're not conscious of, but they are impacting our behaviors. So there are disowned selves that we spoke about, the parts we wish we didn't have. But he was saying that that was the shadow at the beginning. And so, yeah, I'm wondering, David, as well, what sort of impact, again, let's do a quick summary, did Freud and Carl have in terms of intuition in this time period, as they were key psychological thinkers, and I think they also ring a bell for a lot of modern listeners and intellects. But I'm also curious as well if you could also mention a little bit about modern neuroscience and if there's any studies about intuition and our shadows with that.
Of course, yes. Well, this was the turning point when intuition and the shadow entered this modern psychology landscape. And as we previously shared, Freud viewed our shadows as these repressed drives, often sexual or aggressive, showing up in dreams or sleeps. And Carl Jung viewed our shadows as hidden traits we deny or project, not just dark, but potential for growth if they are integrated. And I think this is the key word. When we integrate the things that we have to learn, that's when we start living them and we start replicating these kind of examples and we break, let's say, the chains of our past ancient lineage and we break free. No? Modern psychology also talks about a concept of shadow work, and now it's very, very popular. And it's facing fears, facing trauma, facing ignored strengths. So shadows shifted here from these moral failings to parts of ourselves that need to be integrated. Now, what happens with intuition? Well, intuition is and thought just unconscious conflict that is surfacing. Carl Jung said it was one of four core functions, sensing patterns and possibilities that are linked to the collective unconscious. So those are all of the things that we absorb from the environment. And this is going to be related nowadays with epigenetics also. So there is one quote that I love from Carl Jung, and it's until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So that's what happens many, many times when we want to justify the things that happen in our lives and we just created them, but on an unconscious level. So I think he's referring to this navigating the shadows using our intuition to guide you, or you will repeat your behaviors and patterns. And this is just the popular knowledge that tells you that when you don't learn the lesson repeats. So, and the lesson will repeat with more difficult things in your life because, let's say, you didn't pass the subject. So, cognitive psychology perspective says that intuition it's equal to fast, and unconscious pattern recognition is expertise working below the awareness. So it's tapping into this power and into this truth, into this inner wisdom that we already have. Therefore, intuition has finally been reframed as a real psychological function. In this 20th century, shadows became the hidden self, and intuition became the bridge between the unconscious and the conscious. Sometimes it can be seen as mystical, Sometimes it can be seen as scientific, but always it is central to how we understand the mind. And as you ask, Amy, from a neuroscience perspective, our shadows are the hidden patterns in the brain. They are unconscious memories, as I spoke before. Probably we are going to discover very soon that this junk DNA has a lot of things that is going to give us clues about why we express certain things. We also know that they are suppressed emotions and they are implicit biases stored in these neural circuits. Intuition is the brain's rapid parallel processing system. They are regions like the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, and the insula that integrate past experiences and subtle sensory cues to generate split second judgments. So these are the things that happen when you are going to have probably an accident and your reflexes, your instinct tells you to just drive in the right direction or don't pass the light still because something is going to happen. So you sense those things and you can't explain why you act that way, but those are the sensory cues that you receive. And they are really so fast that you cannot explain them. Epigenetics now shows how environment and experience can modify gene expression and shaping the development and plasticity of these neural circuits. So that means the way our brain unconsciously processes information, our intuitive responses, is influenced not just by the experience, but by the biological changes at the molecular level that turn on the light, let's say, in the genes. So this is just very, very amazing for me because it's everything that has been spoken by this ancient wisdom now translated into this scientific jargon and scientific words, and engaging with our shadows helps refine these circuits, enhancing both our self-awareness and the decision-making process. So this is all the world of the science, and this is how we are merging now the spiritual things, the things that we have known for ages into the scientific process. And to wrap up, I will give you 5 useful holistic wellness tips, as we usually do, to integrate the shadows and the intuition. So what do you recommend, Amy?
That's some amazing, amazing ideas of the science, David. I totally agree. I love learning about the neuroplasticity and epigenetics, but you're right. Let's think about some tips of how we can integrate shadow and intuition with our life. Well, we could, number one, do some shadow mapping with light and dark journaling. So you could have a dual journal, one journal for your shadow thoughts, fears, judgments, impulses, and another journal for your intuitive insights, your gut feelings, inspirations, flashes of clarity. And if you have a regular practice at the beginning of the day or the end, you might be able to spend some time drawing any connections between your shadow and intuition entries. You might start seeing patterns and hidden guidance in your life. And that's why a lot of psychologists, a bit like Freud and Carl Jung, they used to keep dream diaries and also connect their shadow and intuition to what their dream messages are saying. Number two, another way that we could integrate these amazing special powers into our life is to do an intuitive meal. So before you eat your food, pause and ask, what does my body truly need? I think our body then might say, hey, this is what I need. And that's sort of our intuition. So we can use this sense to choose our foods instinctively and reflect after on how our body responds, creating sort of a somatic awareness, a somatic connection. And this might reveal as well with our diet some hidden emotional and shadow needs, basic needs. A third way that we could integrate it is using mirror conversations. This sounds a bit funny, but I think I might try and do this. So, in a mirror, stand in front of it and talk to your shadow self. Just talk to it, acknowledging all those rubbish stuff you've been through, all that crap in your life, all those fears and traits that you're avoiding or you don't want to tell anyone about. Confront it yourself in the mirror. And then after that, it might feel a bit uncomfortable, but take that moment of being in peace to listen inward for any intuitive responses, any subtle shifts in expression, tone, or breath after you've revealed your inner world and listen to that inner guidance. So, this could be a practice that merges that shadow that you're talking about in the mirror with your direct embodied inner sense and intuition. Number 4 is to go on a synchronicity walk. So that means when you go on a walk without a plan and you notice all the coincidences, any signs, signals, small impulses that attract your attention. Document any patterns in a notebook afterwards. These can reveal a lot about what you notice. A lot about what you notice reveals your subconscious, and it will show some guidance into your shadow and intuition. Also, when you're doing a little bit of synchronicity walks, you'll be able to spot that inner voice. That inner voice will be coming a lot more easily. So you'll be able to recognize it in real time, able to observe, what things are coming up as our shadow and what things are more our intuition, what things are our desires and what things are our distractions.
Mhm.
And the last number 5 recommendation would be to do some shadow dialogue art. So just getting a big piece of artwork, a big A4 poster, and on one side drawing everything that represents your shadow. For me, that might be red, black, dark blue, green, bit chaotic. And on the other side, my intuitive self, which for me feels like a swirl of pastel colors and sparkles. So
Mhm.
you can yourself use any textures, shapes, and colors to represent your emotional truths, even those you don't want to talk about verbally. You can maybe draw a little bit of a picture or symbol to represent that. And then by having that piece, it sounds like also a really fun workshop to do, David. So maybe we should do this in one of our courses to explore your intuition and your shadow self. But that creates sort of a visual conversation where you can integrate and harmonize those hidden aspects of ourselves, the blind spots, and we can then sort of repair and heal any things we were unaware of with our inner wisdom. So, what would you like to do in your life, David, out of those tips?
I love these exercises. I think right now the one that really sparked or spoke to me was this one about representing these shadow aspects by drawing something that represents these fears or these repressed things that happen. And actually, from yesterday to today, I had a dream with black spiders, and I remember a lot about these spiders. And I just searched what does it mean, and it means two things: either if you are in the shadow part or if you are in the light. So I will share with you what happens with these kind of dreams. So it says that when you have this shadow and you can have a mix of emotions that include anxiety, fear, or feeling trapped. But also in the light side of this dream can be creativity, can be potential, and can be transformation. So it depends mostly, your dreams depends mostly on how you feel in your life. If you're rushing or having these challenges in your life, probably this is your shadow speaking about the fear. And if you are peaceful, things are going well, maybe this is the light and the intuition telling you that this is a good moment to create things, to have potential. And that's what I interpret right now from these spiders. We have this potential right now to create these amazing episodes with you. and to interact into these conversations that are really stories from our past, and we really go across time and we challenge their remains. We step into this relationship with the shadow, not to banish it, not to judge it, not to do anything, but let it guide us toward the light and toward integrating many things that we need to understand about ourselves. So, in our next episode, we are going to talk about a topic that is very popular right now, and it's nutrition and fasting. So we are going to, let's say, demystify these concepts with the science and with the history, because there is a lot of history about fasting. And is fasting good for you or not? Women should do it, children should do it. What happens with our bodies when we start fasting? And what are we doing? What have cultures over time felt about their diet and having breaks from eating? So join us next week to find out how this ancient wisdom is going to direct us to what is happening right now. And I encourage you to follow us on YouTube, on Substack, on Spotify, on Apple Podcast. We have these amazing platforms right now that you can just listen in your car driving. Instead of being in a bad mood with the traffic, you can listen to one episode of ours so that you can cultivate your mind and integrate your shadow aspect of these traffic jams. So also interact with us in the Facebook group that we very soon we are going to start this live transmission in our Facebook group. So start following us so that you don't lose track of the episodes. Thank
Thank
you.
you again, everyone. It was lovely to see you all here today. I look forward to joining you next week. I'm not sure I'm going to be doing some fasting before that, David, but we can definitely talk about the benefits in our next talk and maybe I'll be convinced. But I'm really looking forward to it. So,
Yeah.
yes, please write a comment if you've watched this and any golden nuggets of wisdom that you are going to take to your life. Let us know. And we look forward to seeing you next week. All right. Take care, everyone.
Take care. Thank you, Amy. See you.
Bye.
Bye.